Hello and welcome to a little late night rendezvous. I wanted to speak about the collapsing of separation in our perception of the darkness. This is something my soul is schooling me in at the moment. It's an unexpected twist and turn in my evolutionary story that I wasn't expecting, but I'm really enjoying. So for a little context, I have been totally branded a conspiracy theorist. That's how others who are still really heavily conditioned have perceived me in the past. I just consider myself a realist, someone that's thinking critically, asking questions, not allowing mass programming to, govern the way I think and perceive. And so there are sort of layers and stages to awakening. We're in the slumber of unconsciousness. We're totally identified with our programming. And then we start to stir from that slumber, right? And we start to question, and we start to recognize darkness. We start to recognize that things aren't as they seem within ourselves, in the world. We start to see an ugliness. We start to see distortion, again, within ourselves and in the world. This is a necessary part of awakening. We start to awaken from the kind of false state of the singularity, which is us being unconscious and being merged with the ego. Then we wake up to duality, right? We start to wake up to light and dark. We wake up to soul and ego. We start to wake up to the marriage of opposites. And then, and this is kind of where I feel I am now, there comes a point on the journey when if we truly want to be free, we truly want to be in complete communion with God, we have to be willing to surrender our righteousness and our ideas and our beliefs and the things that we, drew a line in the sand for, our hills to die on. We have to be willing to release our allegiance to those things so that we can be completely in communion with the singularity of love and truth that God is, that we are in our absolute nature. And so what's been sort of unfolding for me recently is this softening of the hardness that I created as I was waking up to the darkness and the inversion in the world. And I don't need to go into great detail. If you know what I'm speaking about, you'll know, right? The agenda that's unfolding and what is happening beyond what is presented to us. And this is multidimensionally as well. This isn't just physically. There is a softening and a dissolving of the judgments that I made that formed, almost sort of rigid grooves within my consciousness of like right and wrong. This person is evil, this person is this person is that, this group is this. This is a solid belief I have. Now, I'm not saying that being able to identify inversion and distortion is superfluous or irrelevant. It's not. It's actually very necessary for our spiritual development to move from the slumber of unconsciousness to wake up and to see duality, to see light and dark, to be able to discern what is inversion, what is distortion, what is, untruth within us and in the world. It's a necessary part of the awakening process. But once we've sort of sharpened that sort of discernment within us and we can just it becomes integrated. It becomes integrated. Our capacity to sort of just know truth starts to become so integrated that we don't need to create these stories and binaries in the mind about who or what something is. We can just sense innately. The soul starts to guide us to say, just stop watching this video. Stop tuning into this person. Stop listening to that music. Stop drinking that drink. Stop eating that food. The soul's discernment starts to move through you in a way that's very natural, integrated and organic. So it no longer becomes kind of this mental, heavily analytical and judgmental thing. It's just a kind of innate gnosis that you hold, that you allow to guide you. And so, and I'm speaking to the people, by the way, that are intent on liberation, the total and complete freedom of consciousness. For those of us that are here to self-realize and to remember our absolute nature, to not be governed by anything or anyone, and to be in complete and total communion with God, to have nothing between us and the divine, not even our righteousness. We also at some point have to surrender all of these really fixed, firm ideas we created about people, about groups, about factions, about the world. That doesn't mean that we surrender our discernment. That doesn't mean we allow ourselves to start engaging with, people or experiences that don't feel sacred to us. It simply means, as I said, we drop the mental judgments and the mental stories and the beliefs that were so sort of crystallized during our awakening period. And we let that embodied knowing guide us towards what is and isn't in alignment for us. So as we start to integrate in this discernment and this knowing of truth, you don't need the mind. You don't need the mind to say, oh, that person's part of the Illuminati, that person's, whatever, distorted, they're channeling this, blah, blah, blah. Your system will just say, not for me. Close the door. Nuh-uh, not interested. And it's just simple. It doesn't need to be formed out of a judgment. A good example is Aubrey Marcus, okay? I think Aubrey Marcus, at a soul level, has done the spiritual community a great favor. Him and his little harem, they've done us a great favor, because at a soul level, they've chosen to be mirrors for us to be able to become aware of just how discerning we've become as a community. He's allowed us to, through his reflection, gauge our capacity to gauge truth. So that's all I'm going to say about that whole situation. For some time, my system has naturally said, don't want to watch. I was at one point watching his podcast, maybe 3 years ago. About 3 years ago, I was watching his podcast. And then at some point, my soul just said, no, don't wish to receive from this being anymore. I don't need to question why that is. I don't need to intellectually understand it. This happens all the time for me, all the time. People, creators, guides, teachers, music, content, ideas, books, whatever, they just drop out of my consciousness. They no longer become relevant. They no longer become engaging. And I've learned to trust that, because my soul has refined enough and I'm connected enough to that knowing to no longer need to intellectualize it. So when it comes to the total and complete liberation of consciousness, if like me, you are a conspiracy theorist, I love being a critical thinker. I love being able to discern truth when others still operate from their programming and from being asleep. I love being able to recognize and feel into the many layers of reality beyond what's presented to me at at just the level of the five senses. That's wonderful. I'm so grateful that I'm refined in that way. And simultaneously, if my soul is intent on complete liberation, which it is, which means dissolving all conditioning, all limiting beliefs, all beliefs, because every belief is a limiting belief. If I am intent on simply being the presence that I am, and residing as that presence embodied, then I also must surrender my egoic notions about darkness. And this is just something that's naturally occurring for me that I want to share. And I can feel, at least for my soul's journey, that this is a very necessary point for us to move from the singularity of being asleep and totally identified with our egoic nature to sort of the duality of being sort of awake and aware to, ego soul. And then to eventually be able to merge with the singularity of awake awareness. We also have to be willing to drop that identification with the binaries of the mind. What comes to me is, how much do you want it? How much do you want to be free? Because anything that you sort of stake in the sand as like, this is this is my belief, this is, my identity, this is my stance, this is my political party, this is my tribe, this is my opinion. You tether an identity to that. You tether a sense or an idea of yourself to that. And therefore you limit yourself. And you limit your capacity to know your true nature. Anything that you stake as a fixed and firm thing in the sand limits you. So you've got to decide what you want. Do you want to be free, or do you want to be right? Whatever that means. Because when you are in communion with God, which is what being free means, who gives a shit about righteousness? Who gives a shit about being the one that appears to be right, or appears to have, ideas that are worthy of investing in, or appears to, be a really great leader that people should follow? Who cares about any of that? It's all vanity. If you truly care about the liberation of your consciousness, you will only actually be concerned with your total communion with and as the one. So how much do you want it? This is quite a hard one for many, self-proclaimed conspiracy theorists. This migration away from being the ones that are awake at a certain level to actually being completely awake and free. So many people, I call this like level 2 of awakening. So many people get stuck here. Like they form an identity out being the one that's awake, but they're only partially awake. They're awake to duality. That's good. That's, another layer or level in the game of life. Now can you wake up and realize that identity you formed out of awakening from duality isn't the true nature of who you are? And can you let it go? And that's where people really struggle. And that's where I struggled for so long. But naturally, as I moved through a huge spiritual ego breakdown this year, a shedding and brutal, agonizing, beautiful, liberating shedding, I see that also this too must be released. This idea, this identity structure. All beliefs are limiting beliefs. Anything you stake a sand in limits your consciousness. Be like water, right? To be free is to be like water. To recognize that the one true source has no limits, is all pervasive, is all powerful. And actually the reason that we tend to create such a harsh, rigid opposition towards groups, factions, agendas, etc. at an earthly level is because on some level we either fear them or we feel like we need to protect ourselves from them, which means we've given them power. But if we're in true communion with God, we know that God is the supreme creator, the supreme power, the supreme force in this world from which all is born. What have I got to fear in these other expressions of the creation field? I'm sheltered. I'm sheltered by the presence of the one, as the presence of the one. What do I need protecting from when I'm in communion with the truth, as the truth? It's only the egoic nature that feels the need to protect, okay? Because the egoic nature is tethered to the physical body. So, oh my gosh, if I don't, hold on to my truth, I fear that maybe this physical body will die or something will happen to me. Well, I'm going to die anyway. This physical body always perishes. Am I willing to sacrifice my loyalty to the divine for that? Am I willing to sell my soul to protect this physical body by choosing righteousness over reverence to the truth? Absolutely not. Go ahead, kill the body. We've died, and we'll, if you have to come back, there'll be many more deaths. It's just what happens in this transient creation field of contrast and change. But the truth prevails. The truth is all pervasive, omnipresent, omnipotent, without boundaries, without limits, without time, without form. And so for a long time, I did give power. I can see now that I gave power to these factions, these groups, these timelines, this agenda that I have an awareness of, and I can sense truth in, but I choose to no longer give it power by recognizing the supreme authority of God and resting completely with that authority, as an expression of that authority. Just something I wanted to share this evening. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.